Добар ден, ова е Еден телевизија, вие сте на вистинската фреквенција, јас сум Сашо Ордановски, како и секој понеделник во отворено студио 1 со вас. Денес имам двајца гости со кои ќе поразговараме на англиски јазик, бидејќи колегите доаѓаат од Вашингтон и ја представуваат една стара, добро позната трансатлантска организација која што работи на подобрување на пријателството и односите помеѓу Соединетите Американски држави и Европа. Организацијата се вика German Marshall Fund. Со мене денеска се господинот Џон Кац, кој што е senior fellow во организацијата, и Жигица Баговски, кој што е менаџер за односи со стратегиски прашања и врски во самата организација. This is in Macedonia, I said. Now we're going to transfer in English. What is GMF actually? Which is the biggest preoccupation, and which is the how should I say, the mission of the organization?
The German Marshall Fund in the United States is a U.S. think tank that is focused on strengthening transatlantic relations. We have offices across Europe, including one in Belgrade, where we have one of GMF's office called the Balkans Trust for Democracy is located. And GMF is focused not only on just security, but it's also focused on Euro-Atlantic integration, including in the Balkans, and also supporting and providing support to civil society, democracy groups that are focused on helping countries transition, including those countries in this region.
Well, you probably had enough, you were very busy in the Balkans, because here for democracy and transitions, we are living this in the last 3 decades, I guess. So, Žikica, what is the cooperation between the region in this sense? Do you have office in Belgrade, but do you your operations are probably in most of the countries in the Balkans?
Yeah, I mean, the Belgrade office generally covers all the Balkan countries and works with the Balkan countries, as Jonathan said, to strengthen democracy and civil society. And we had a crucial role, I think, during the political crisis in Macedonia by supporting the civil society organizations here and trying to build this sense of citizenry in the country. But also we have our office in Bucharest that covers the Black Sea region. So, I mean, our region here in the Western Balkans, but also the larger Black Sea region are pretty much covered with our operations. And we also do some programming here in Macedonia, but in the other Balkan countries through our offices based in Brussels and Berlin.
The reason I called you in my program is that actually you are very active in the last several months in promoting North Macedonian position now in Washington, especially in the face of the NATO ratification process. Jonathan, people are saying that allegedly we may have problems in Washington with the ratification of the NATO agreement. Is this true? I mean, you have hosted Osmani recently, Radmila Šekerinska was there, or she is going next week. Nikola Dimitrov was there as well. So you are covering Macedonia from many aspects, writing articles, making TV programs, making programs there for our people, and so on and so forth. So what is the sense, what is the, how should I say, the atmosphere in Washington concerning Macedonian process to NATO?
Sure. Well, first, the PRESPA agreement is seen and is strongly supported in Washington. And this includes both Democrats and Republicans in Washington. And I think you would find no daylight between the position and strong support and appreciation for the leadership here in North Macedonia for really stepping out on a difficult issue, one that I know is deeply felt by Macedonians as well, and in Athens and in Greece. And so I think first and foremost, everybody is appreciative that there's been this extraordinary leadership. Second, everybody is supportive across the board of Euro-Atlantic integration, NATO membership, the invitation, the protocol. Everything is moving forward in the right direction. I think the main challenge in Washington is not about whether Congress will support this agreement, I mean, support NATO accession and North Macedonia moving in that direction. It's a question of whether or not the President of the United States, who has been up to this point, couldn't be any more supportive through letters in support, sending General Mattis, sending top U.S. officials to Skopje in a way that we haven't seen previously. The question at the end of the day is, will the President sign off on that NATO membership, and those are the things that that we as a think tank in Washington, a bipartisan think tank, can continue to speak and bring in leaders from Skopje to help make the case as to why this is important.
What is the prospect for how long this process will take? Can we expect that, because there is a summit in London at the end of this year of NATO, 70 years of the establishment foundation of the organization. Can it be done until December, or it will go next year? What's the prospect for?
Yeah, I mean, it's realistic, I think, that we can expect for the US to ratify the protocol by the end of the year. In terms of process, how this works is usually, I mean, the Pentagon, which is the Ministry of Defense in the US, practically will prepare all the kind of the resume about why Macedonia should become a member, and we work closely with the White House and the National Security Council. So it will be expected that the White House will send the protocol, and President Trump will send the protocol for ratification in the Senate, and then the Senate will need to deliberate about the whole.
It will take months, I guess.
Yeah, it will take. And then when the Senate ratifies that, they send it back to the desk of the President to sign, to finally sign off. The issue is that if we look comparatively what happened with Montenegro, the process was, I think, longer than a year.
But we have a Slovenian lady there, so she can.
Yeah, let's hope that
push the
she can push the process. No, I'm not afraid of that. I mean, I think that there could be a couple of hiccups. Two members of the Senate voted against the membership of Montenegro, and I think we can expect the same to happen with Macedonia, to potentially 3.
It's democracy.
Yeah, it is democracy, but the problem is that they also can place a motion to hold for the vote, which can last like 1 month, or if the 2 senators place it, it can last 2 months, which will delay the process. And we know how the whole issue is sensitive, and I mean, it's needed to be closed as soon as possible. So those small things, I think, can provoke a problem.
Yes. You know, the other thing that I would add too is that there's an expectation that on reforms here, anti-corruption reforms, judicial reforms, when we look at these packages that the EU is seeking, that also matters too, is that there's continued momentum on the democratic track of North Macedonia. And I think people will be looking at that. There's a presidential election coming up here too. And so I think there'll be a lot of scrutiny in Washington as well as Brussels to see how the government continues to move forward on this track. So that aspect,
that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
But it's important to keep that in mind, and that's part of the messaging too to the government and to Parliament while we're here, which is you've done this tremendous job on PRESPA. I'm sure everybody's exhausted from just moving forward, but now comes probably the harder part, which is, if one can believe there's a harder part than that, to keep this moving forward so that Macedonians believe that their future, democratic future, more prosperous future is something that's really within grasp.
How was the reaction, how do you assess the reaction of the region to this PRESPA agreement? How much will this agreement going to influence other open issues in the Balkans, especially Albanian-Serbian issue, but also Bosnia and so on and so forth? How do you judge it from the GMF point of view?
You know, from when we look at the region, obviously resolving a historic issue like is taking place today, we hope is a catalyst for resolving the differences between Kosovo and Serbia, challenges in Bosnia as well. And I think you can even see within the Trump administration right now a real effort on their part to fast forward the differences between Pristina and Belgrade to such a point that I think President Trump offered the Rose Garden for a ceremony if we can get everybody to the table. But that also comes with a risk too. The leadership here and in Athens spent a great deal of time to get to the point where they got to an agreement and then implementing it, talking to the public about it, and even then it was a challenge in both countries. I think there's a lot of work to be done, both in Serbia and Kosovo, with their publics to get to the point where there's an agreement that people feel comfortable with. One of the dangers is that you try to you see that there's success here, that you try to push for success, in between Pristina and Belgrade, and that it backfires, and that you end up creating a much more difficult situation. So, absolutely, it's an example. I can't think of anything better for countries that want to join NATO. This is outside of the Balkans as well, when they look at the success here of North Macedonia. So it's an example not only for this region, not only important for this region's security and stability, but it's also it's important for international partners and others that are looking at Euro-Atlantic integration.
However, you cannot resolve this kind of problems if there is no trust between the leaders who are involved in the process. I mean, we saw that very clearly between Tsipras and Zaev, and we believe that, I believe that, that was one of the key reasons why the whole process eventually, with a lot of hurdles and with a lot of problems, eventually was completed in a way it was done. In the case of Serbia and Kosovo, we see a lot of mistrust, not trust. Can it be done without, I mean, that's probably something which is in the job description of GMF. Building trust between leaders, between political elites, regionally. So do you work anything in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. And because we have an office in Belgrade that is focused on reconciliation and conversations between leaders in Pristina and Belgrade, hosting conferences as well. In fact, next week we'll host an event here in Skopje that will include participants from across the Balkans. Our main goal is ultimately in the end is that this region, when it is in the right space, these borders will all come down, trade will increase, all the countries in the region will hopefully be part of the EU and working together. And I think the resolution of it means that there has to be trust built up, and I think we're working hard as an organization, but with partners, to do this.
Aren't you afraid that once you start changing again borders, that may reflect on various other situations, not only the Balkans, but in Europe as well?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we are talking about changing the border between Kosovo and Serbia.
Yeah, I mean, it's really opening a Pandora box, I would say. You really can't mark clear ethnic borders, especially in the Balkans. So I think instead of focusing on marcation of borders and trying to set borders, we should really talk about how, as Jonathan said, we have open borders where we can increase trade, we can increase cooperation.
I know, but the thing is that now the process is going in that direction. They are discussing, unsuccessfully so far, but they are discussing changing the border and making some territorial compensations from Serbia to Kosovo and vice versa. So in Macedonia, we're always very sensitive whenever the borders are in question, and I guess in the Balkans in general. Because once you start opening these issues, playing with geography, then you never know where it stops.
I think things that worry me about this. It always worries me when you have Moscow on the same side of an issue, particularly on this. And I think Washington, Brussels needs to be particularly sensitive to the other challenges with Russia, particularly in places like Crimea, where you can see where Russia may be looking to change the definition or this issue of land swap to say, hey, look, this happened between Pristina and Belgrade. You guys can accept that Crimea is Russian, or Abkhazia is Russian, or Transnistria. I mean, the list goes on and on. So being really sensitive to that issue is important. But I also think not trying to force a resolution to an issue that may not have popular support in either country right now, and that the publics haven't been brought to the table with the governments. And I think perhaps in Belgrade this may work, but I don't think it will. And I think Vučić knows, he understands the politics. And I think also in Kosovo, you have really a split leadership between the president and the prime minister. And I think resolving those issues and moving forward and also having the US and the EU working together, but committed for the long term, because whatever comes out of an agreement is going to need tremendous amount of hand-holding, resources, oversight, and I think it's something that's going to require an international component.
People are saying that Russia is a tectonic force in the Balkans. You can't see it on the ground, but there is the existence of Russia somewhere below the, below the ground. United States were very, how should I say, very tough and very pushy in a way, constantly repeating that, even at one point, that the Balkan is the new frontier of confrontations between the West and Russia. In this context, is the Prespa agreement something which will decrease or increase this kind of? Because there is an attitude that Russia allegedly lost its interest in this position between Greece and Macedonia, and however they're still active because they see now Macedonia as a new member of NATO, and we have here activities which are on a larger scale than ever by the Russians. How big is the Russian threat, or how should I say, do we have to see it as a threat, or we can see it as opportunity even?
Well, I mean, Russia was never traditionally a partner of Macedonia. We all know that. Macedonia always looked to the West, pretty much. But Russia picks and chooses when to kind of like get involved, and they usually do that when there's a potential interest. They did it with Montenegro, trying to build up in the face of the Montenegro membership to NATO and trying to sabotage the membership. And we know what happened there. I mean, they tried to employ similar tactics here in Macedonia. And I mean, what some people say is pretty much that Macedonia was a geopolitical battle place for the United States and the West and Russia in the last several months. Because we know that generally Russia is against the NATO expansion, and the US and the West supported Macedonia through the Prespa to help us achieve the goal of the NATO expansion. So I think that after we signed the NATO protocol, we are like finalizing the process. I think Russia over time will decrease their role, because I don't think that they see any further strategic interest here in Macedonia, neither economic nor political.
Yes, that's true. Jonathan, finally, GMF is a result of the liberal consensus after the Second World War, in an extent. That liberal consensus in Europe and in the United States is deeply now in crisis. How do you see the role of your organization, and how do you see, I mean, we have rising of nationalisms, of populisms, of various kind of autocracies and so on and so forth. How do you see the role of your organization in these new times, and can you adjust, are you adjusting to the new conditions that you're operating in?
Well, I think GMF is doubling down, as one would say, in support of transatlantic relations. It still remains the bedrock of US security, of European security, of democracy. And when we talk about trade and we talk about partners that we want to work with globally, it's still the transatlantic relationship, it's still the EU, it's still the United States, and it's still an effort to support the integration of countries that want to be part of this Euro-Atlantic community. And so for GMF, we're doubling down in terms of support for civil society. And this includes in the Balkans, across Eastern Europe, Central Europe, going back into places before where we see democracy is under threat by either authoritarians or Russian aggression, which you just mentioned. And one thing I would say is when you talk about the Russians and their intentions in the Balkans, they're pretty clear about it. Mr. Lavrov has been pretty clear that they oppose Prespa, that they oppose NATO expansion. And I don't think that they will, even if NATO membership happens for North Macedonia, they're still going to be here sort of poking around. Their whole goal is destabilize, turn people against each other. In a place like North Macedonia where you have these divisions within society, that's exactly where Moscow and its propaganda machine looks to. They look for the cracks. They look for the cracks in terms of corruption. And I think the malign influence in a place like the Balkans remains where you have fractures. So the sooner that you can move this region into this Euro-Atlantic space and integrate into the EU, into NATO, over a period, making certain that the countries in the region, put themselves in the best possible position, that's going to be the bulwark against authoritarians in this shift. And I want to slightly disagree. I think democracy is a lot stronger than people give it credit for. And that nationalists, particularly those that are popping up in places like Hungary or in Europe, they've had some success, but I don't think they're winning the day. And I think that what you're seeing today in countries across Europe is a rise of a new form of both democracy and civil society that will be the bulwark against this type of threat.
Okay, on this light note, on this optimistic note, Jonathan Katz, thank you very much for your presence here. Жикица Паговски, благодарам.
Благодарам на
А
вас.
вие, почитувани гледачи, останете со 1 ТВ, следуваат информативни содржини кои што сум сигурен дека ќе ви го задржат вниманието.